in watching the price go crazy, you just start thinking, okay, well, if Bitcoin is what I think it is, the price action right now is rational. It's going to infinity, and I'm not going to be able to get enough. Ultimately, it was just Bitcoiners started asking me to buy wine, and then Bitcoiners started asking me to buy wine with Bitcoin, and they kept doing so. And they really kept doing so to the point where it was like, this is a growing thing for my business. And all of this goes into diet. And I think when you get into Bitcoin, you kind of start thinking a little bit more long term. So you start looking at your diet, you start looking at your lifestyle and wanting to figure out, like, look, if I'm going to be extremely wealthy in a few years, I want to be able to enjoy that. Bitcoiners buy from other Bitcoiners and basically are super value aligned and want to spend their money, vote with their money on people and things that are either driving their life forward or driving the world they want to see forward. And so high quality wine that doesn't make you feel bad drives your life forward, you're going to buy from me.
This podcast is entertainment, not financial tax or legal advice. Views expressed represent statements of the speaker in their individual capacity, do not represent the views of Unchained, and should not be considered investment advice. Speakers often have personal, family, or business connections to Unchained, which may include direct financial benefits. Please see our disclosure at unchained.com/podcast.
All right. Welcome back to the Bitcoin Frontier podcast. We are here exploring the ideas, the people, the breakthroughs that are really driving Bitcoin adoption, driving it forward. I'm here with a very special guest, Ben Justman. He is a winemaker, an entrepreneur, and a Bitcoiner. Ben, so excited to have you. Really excited to hear the story. And how's it going?
It's going great. Thanks for having me, Trey. Honored to be here and excited to get into it.
The number's going up. Some might say it's going higher.
This is true. This is my entire business model is based on Bitcoin actually working. So I am happy to know it's working every day, but it is very cathartic to see number go up after years of sideways and getting into it a year of down. So this is kind of my first run up, and it's been exciting to watch, and hopefully we're just getting started.
Yeah, I think, the Bitcoiners who have come in the last cycle have really not experienced this massive run up that happens from time to time every few years. And, if you're building a business in the space, if you are selling wine to Bitcoiners, which you are, I imagine that these different cycles really play into like the way that the business runs and the conversations that you're having and people's enthusiasm about learning about a winemaker who's selling wine for Bitcoin. So, I'm really excited to just hear the story about what Peony Lane is, how you got started, where did the love for wine come from? Where did the love for Bitcoin come from? Was it Bitcoin first and then wine, or wine and then Bitcoin? Like, take us through it.
Yeah. So I was 25 working as a geologist using my degree and kind of had run out of good options for what I wanted to do with that career. Never really saw something beyond the entry level that I enjoyed and was hating my life at the time as far as work goes. And knew I needed to bet on myself big and knew I needed to start a business, but was just like, had a couple side hustles and kind of needed something that was really committing and just that I would go for to really bet on myself. And I grew up on a farm in Western Colorado where my dad grew all his own food. And when in 2004, he got convinced to plant a vineyard, where he just had a plot of land that he needed to plant something on after cutting out some apple trees. And he produced wine for 3 years, commercially, but made it, non-professionally for 10 to 15 and got some rave reviews. But I had never honestly considered that as a business option for me. But one day, just talking to him normally, it came up, talked it through, and it was kind of a no-brainer in the sense that I was able to get the capital to get started through a loan from him, had the infrastructure to at least get started and produce wine that first year. And then I also kind of knew that there was something special with that vineyard because my dad didn't have much for a sense of taste or smell and was able to produce wine that serious wine people were kind of going crazy for. So I figured if he could figure it out, I could figure it out. I'd never made wine before, but grew up working in the vineyard and kind of just went for it, honestly. And so in that time, I had about 2 years before I was going to have any wine to sell. So that was the committing part. I really wanted something like that, but I needed to figure out what to do. So then he talked about wanting to build a house with one of his kids. He built houses his whole life and we subdivided a piece of land off from the property I grew up on. And I moved home to my hometown, 2,000 people. And me, my dad, and one other guy built a house that I'm living in now. And in that time, I moved home. I moved in with a good friend of mine from high school who was really smart. And he and I just got to talking, and turns out he was a Bitcoiner. And one thing leads to another, and I'm listening to 6 hours of Bitcoin podcasts while I'm building my business and building my house. And it just kind of one thing led to another. I was already interested in personal finance, was curious about the inflation, what inflation was really, and just kind of became a Bitcoiner as I was going through this like deep, intense, low time preference education of starting a winery, building a house, and then learning about Bitcoin. It was all kind of at once. So I really got sucked in.
Yeah, I know. It's a super fascinating story. This was like a couple of years ago, correct? Or it was right before the 2020 run up? Like when did you actually come into Bitcoin and were starting to learn about that? How long had you been doing wine and starting to make wine before then?
I started getting my liquor license in 2019, moved home in 2020, and missed the
Okay, so it was all
3K.
coinciding at the same. It was all
Yeah,
coinciding around the same time.
totally. So as I was like kind of just buying my first sats, Bitcoin was going absolutely insane. And I was falling down the rabbit hole, realizing what Bitcoin was. And in watching the price go crazy, you just start thinking, okay, well, if Bitcoin is what I think it is, the price action right now is rational. It's going to infinity, and I'm not going to be able to get enough. So I think that, I mean, there's so many people that come into Bitcoin during the price run up and start figuring it out and figure it out at the top. And that's a tale as old as Bitcoin. But it's kind of, if you're not already familiar with markets, it's just like, oh, the market's being rational. It's going to infinity. And yeah, I'll never be able to actually build a stack of Bitcoin. And then you start learning about the 4-year cycle and markets in general. And people do sell Bitcoin at times. So things change. But yeah, I kind of got trial by fire in all of the things. I mean, building a house is hard. And then making wine, going from no winemaker knowledge to building a business around it, investing your entire life savings, and then finding Bitcoin, a second thing that you absolutely need to invest your entire life savings in right now. Yeah, it was all pretty intense right at once.
Yeah, I love wine and drink quite a bit of it. We've hung out in Colorado. We've hung out in Big Sky. I've drank a lot of your wine. They're really, really great. And anybody listening to this, you should absolutely go to Peony Lane and order some wine, try it, from Ben. He's done a phenomenal job. I think about wine and the process and the time and the investment that is needed to make good wine. It is absolutely a low time preference endeavor, that requires intentionality, that requires thinking about like sometimes 5, 10, 15, 25, like 50 years in the future in order to like really craft a style or a collection of wines that you're putting out there. Is that how you think about the overlap between Bitcoin and wine? I mean, obviously Bitcoin is a low time preference endeavor as well.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of overlap there. And I think I get a lot of questions about whether Bitcoin kind of helps with the winery. And I think if you zoom out long term, it's great, but each season is its own thing. And so if, for instance, like I make wine, generally I make reds and I age them for 2 years. And so in that 2 years, I kind of like, if I make a lot of wine one year and then the next year there's a big frost and I don't get any grapes, I can hopefully paper it over with the next year, but there's a bit of waiting, and hopefully I've built up some stock before that to be able to paper over. And just like with Bitcoin, if I got in 6 years ago, I have some capital to be able to be in a drawdown and be totally fine. But as with anything, as you're getting started, you're a lot more susceptible to risk. And so I'm just kind of drawing the parallels now, but in my first year of selling wine, which became my third year of making wine, right after we harvested, there was excuse me, I made wine in 2019, made wine again in 2020, and then right after picking in 2020, there was a hard frost. And so every grapevine in Colorado got frozen out. And they come back, but you lose a year of growing, and then the next year is low production. So basically, right as I'm getting going, what I'm trying to build my baseline on, which is my Pinot Noir that is a 20-year-old vineyard, produces great wine, everything gets ripped out from under me, and I have to go buy grapes from elsewhere, and just really figure things out I have to make wine because I don't have any stock, because I'm just getting going, but this is completely not what I want to be doing. And you learn, adapt, improvise, and that's building a business in general, is having to put out fires and everything. But that was pretty major. And then that year that I had no grapes was also the top of the 2021, the top of Bitcoin. And so that whole next year, I learned the hard way on Bitcoin cycles. And I think that while it sucks to learn the hard way, there's really no other way. And I'm really happy with both of those, that I learned the hard way early. Because with wine, now I know, like, look, it's okay to have too much. There may be a bad year. I'll just paper over like a bad year by not producing anything and selling extra stock, because wine gets better with time. And aging, it's not a problem. Yeah, I would prefer to have more cash flow, but it's not a huge problem. And then with Bitcoin, it really is time in the market. And if you're trying to chase things, you're probably going to lose. And so you see these big run-ups and you're like, oh, Bitcoin's get rich quick technology, but it's also get poor quick technology. And you really have to take a low time preference approach. And so, I was a big skier, was always into the adrenaline and moving fast, breaking things, and got humbled massively by those two events. And it's been incredible learning process along the way for both those things, in kind of slowing down, letting things come to you, and moving when you're from a position of strength.
Yeah, I know the weather in winemaking is so important, and it's also something that you can't control. You can't control what the temperature is going to be like. You can't control how much rainfall you're going to get. You can't control some type of frost that comes through and kills all the grapes on the vines that you just weren't expecting. So you have to be able to roll with that. I feel like the Bitcoin market and the volatility and these adoption cycles that we're going through are very similar in that regard. You're talking about this vintage. This was what, the 2020 vintage that you were that had the
2021 vintage.
The 2021 vintage. And so you implied, hey, these are grapes that you're growing on vineyards that are in Colorado there with you, that you're tending to, that you're actually growing the grapes. What did you do for that vintage? You outsourced from California, or like, what was the series of steps that you took to overcome that challenge there? And what was the end result? Did you just make a completely different wine than what you had envisioned because these grapes are different?
So normally I grow Pinot Noir on my vineyard, and then I source other varieties from around Colorado. So there's another large growing region about an hour and a half from me that grows completely different varieties, because they're surprisingly, their climate is much different. So that kind of gives me, my business, a little bit more variety. My calling card, what I'm trying to build my name off of, is my Pinot Noir. But that year, initially I just thought, well, I guess I'm kind of screwed. I'm just not going to make any wine this year and see how the business goes. But because like all my connections are done, I'd never built up connections. It was my third year ever making wine and really had no idea where to go, but ended up getting connected with some growers in California and kind of took the opportunity to use it as a learning process in a few different ways, but ultimately trying a bunch of different varieties of wine. I was still learning wine at the time. What do I like? What do I want to produce? And what does the market want? And so I made Tempranillo, Syrah, Merlot, Malbec, Cab Sauv, Cab Franc. Some of those I'll probably never make again because they don't grow as well in Colorado where it's hard to get them. But it was a great learning experience from the sense of, do I want to produce a little bit of a lot of things? Do I want to produce like a bunch of random varieties, change it up every year? Which varieties work? I learned that people still, when you have a Merlot, the only thing people know about Merlot is the sideways quote, "I'm not drinking another effing Merlot." And they've probably, some of them have never had a Merlot. So I learned to not make Merlot anymore, I guess. But ultimately, I think the big thing was I was forced to adapt and forced to learn and figured out that a few varieties I didn't want to do. And I was better off producing a little bit more of each variety and fewer varieties and creating some differentiation by doing some blending within that. So the winemaking season is, I mean, you're always making wine. And wine is never done. It's just in the bottle and humans are no longer manipulating it. But the main winemaking season is in the fall and everything kind of comes in a 1 to 2 month window. And it's a very intense season. So you get the grapes, and as soon as you get the grapes, you have to crush and start the fermentation to make sure they don't go bad. And it produces better wine, obviously. So you are living on grape time. And I just say, like, during that time of year, not every day is insane, but every single day, there is something that if I don't do it that day, I'm absolutely screwed in 3 days or something like that. And every single day I build out my 1 week calendar of my plan for the next week. And every single day, 5 out of 7 of those days are completely different than what I wrote down the day before. So it's just this constant, like, trying to keep track of everything and keeping things a little bit more simple, a little bit less varieties, has made it easier for me. And the goal is, look, if I can just produce super high quality wine, doesn't matter if I have 10 of them, 5 of them, or 1 of them. High quality wine is what sells. That's what people want. And ultimately, that's the goal. So
yeah, and you have
trial by
to,
fire.
You have to kind of adapt on a yearly basis to what the weather and the circumstances are for that year anyway, right? Like sometimes, hey, if you're getting like a lower yield for whatever reason, or it's just not as higher quality grapes, maybe you don't produce that Pinot or that one type of wine that year, and you just have to like deal with that and roll with that for what you're actually putting out to market. I imagine that, you know, the process of learning how to create wine and learning the style that you want to adapt or create, the approach to winemaking probably evolves over time, especially in those early years as you're learning, coming up that learning curve. What is the approach that you take to winemaking? Like, what would you say is your stamp or your style? What are the things that you do that others don't, and what are the things that you don't do that others do that kind of creates a unique profile for the wines that you're making?
So that's kind of the beauty of being in Colorado, is it's this wine region that most people don't know exists, and it's a very unique place. I'm in the highest elevation wine region in North America, and to give you context, like, I'm farming at about 6,000 feet, and when I went out to California to get grapes that one year, they were like, "Oh, it's cool, you're in Colorado, like, we have some high elevation grapes too." And they were bragging about being at 1,000 feet above sea level. So we are well beyond what most people consider possible. And that kind of gives us a lot of seasonal variation, because with the Pinot, we have just long enough of a season to really get it ripened. And sometimes that means it's freezing tomorrow. We would love to have it on the vines for another week, but we are picking tomorrow or today because we can't grow anymore. So the seasonal variation is something I lean into, and generally I lean into less is more. And like I said, the beauty in that is I'm in a place where there's no expectations. People haven't heard of Peony, Colorado. They haven't heard of Colorado wine. So there's not this burden of, oh, this is what a Colorado Pinot Noir should taste like. That doesn't exist, that thought. And a big part of that is time preference. It takes 50 years-ish to establish something like that, because you plant a vineyard, you don't get grapes for the first 5 years, you're going to age a red for another 2 years in the cellar, and then you need probably another 5 years of consistent good production for the farmer next door to say, oh, cool, you've been doing well with that Pinot Noir, let me plant a vineyard myself, because it takes so long to recoup your costs on a vineyard. And so with that, it just takes forever to establish a wine region, and then you have to get more people to taste the wine, to like it, to build up a consistent drive for it, and consistent taste profile that people are looking for. So that's early with Peonia, and my goal is to let the grapes do their thing. So I'm trying to just be like, hey, this is the way the wine should taste from Peonia. By it has less manipulation from me, the winemaker. I'm doing some. Every winemaker is going to put on some spin, but my goal is to let the grapes speak for themselves by not using additives to change the flavor. I have no end goal as to what this wine should taste like, and there's a lot of winemakers who are making wine to score high on this specific test or ranking scale, because that's worth millions and millions and millions of dollars. If you're making a California Cab that's 92 versus 93 point, that's a very different product as far as making money off of it. So there's no pressure like that. It's just let the grapes speak for themselves. I think they produce great products. And when it comes to wine, I generally say to people who are looking to learn or are intimidated by getting into wine, there's only two things that matter. One is, do you like it? Do you personally like it? And I can tell you there's been plenty of times in my life that a serious wine person has given me a bottle that they're raving about, that they say is incredible, whether it's expensive or not. And I think it's crap. And, you know, you don't tell someone that it's crap wine. You know, you probably enjoy it for some nerdy sense, like it has this interesting flavor that I've never had before. But you're just honest with yourself. And it's hard when you're first getting into wine because there's a lot of jargon. There's a lot of classism. You don't really feel like you can say, I don't like this. Bottle costs $100. Like, of course it's good, but I don't like it. And that's what matters. And I just want to give people the confidence to say, if you don't like a wine, that means it's not good. It's fine. And the second thing is how you feel afterwards. And this is something that was kind of a big mind-blowing revelation for me, is I always knew that if you didn't add, quote unquote, didn't add a ton of sulfites to wine, you wouldn't get headaches. And I was young hearing that from my dad and hearing wives come to the house that can't drink red wine. They drink my dad's red wine and it's totally fine the next day for headaches. But for me, I was young at that time. I didn't get hangovers. But now when I drink my wine or French wine or other low intervention wine versus conventional, generally California wine or any other alcohols, it's amazing the difference in how you feel after drinking it. And so it kind of got me looking down this rabbit hole of what's actually in these wines, what's actually in all these other alcohols that is making you feel bad, because the alcohol is the same. So it can't be that. It has to be something different. And what I found is in wine, there's 73 different additives that you can put in a bottle without any ingredients label. So it's this black box. You have no idea what's in there when you buy a bottle of wine at the store. And any of those things you could be having a bad reaction to. People blame sulfites, tannins, all kinds of stuff. And ultimately, I think a lot of those people are really just grasping for the word they know in wine. And what I find is, like, yes, generally California wines, you're going to feel a lot worse from. There is a lot of great wine in California. But I tend to tell people, meet the winemaker, ask some questions about their intervention style, what they feel about sulfites. You'll probably get a vibe check pretty quick there. And then if you have no idea, if you're just at a store, just buy French or Italian wine or ask the store person for low intervention, because the difference in how you feel in drinking low intervention natural wine is pretty massive, and I think just says a lot about like the quality, as far as like, look, you shouldn't have to drink wine that makes you feel bad. So once you kind of see it, it's really eye-opening, as far as like, I associated alcohol with hangovers and feeling bad, but it just doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, I just got back from Italy in the Piemonte region and drinking some Barolos and Barbarescos and that kind of thing. And, it's like you end up drinking a good amount of wine there because it's just so good. And you're right. Like there's not that same level of, hangover or dehydratedness or whatever, coming on the back end of that. And maybe that's because you're also drinking a lot of that with pasta and pizza, and that kind of soaks it up too. But
seed oils are a big part of it.
Yeah.
Actually, if you eat seed oils when you're drunk or when you're drinking, your hangover is going to be a lot worse. And generally, if you're eating more seed oils, your hangovers are going to be worse. So that's another data point for being over in Italy is, they're using more butter and olive oil.
Yeah.
So it is a holistic thing. I mean, all of this goes into diet. And I think when you get into Bitcoin, you kind of start thinking a little bit more long term. So you start looking at your diet, you start looking at your lifestyle and wanting to figure out, like, look, if I'm going to be extremely wealthy in a few years, I want to be able to enjoy that. And so you start looking at these little things and figuring out and also you kind of learn, like, how am I being lied to? What's the angle in all this? And seed oils, obviously a lot of people go down that rabbit hole, but when you're looking at drinking alcohol, because a lot of people enjoy that, brings out some great things in moments and meals, you can really start finding that you just feel so much better drinking low intervention wine than most other alcohols.
Yeah. Well, that's a good segue, right? So you're a Bitcoiner. You started in wine, but that Bitcoin, as you're saying, it kind of was coming together or coming to you around the same time. How does Bitcoin fit into your business? Are you accepting Bitcoin as payment for wines? I think you are. Do you think about it in terms of a treasury strategy? Like, how do you think about Bitcoin in the context of running your wine business?
Bitcoin has become basically everything for me, and it was a natural shift. Yes, like, I got really into it, and so of course I'm going to start figuring out how to get more Bitcoin, but the real shift from Peony Lane moving into Bitcoin was just leaning towards my best customers. So that friend that got me into Bitcoin, he always knew everything before me, and I figured out that he was just getting his information from Twitter. So I got on Twitter to not be dumb in our conversations and started just posting what I was doing. And Bitcoiners started asking me to buy wine and then to buy wine with Bitcoin. And it's not an easy thing for me to do. Well, it's easy to send Bitcoin and everything, but as far as like my procedures go for liquor licensing and taxes and everything across state lines, it's not plug and play. So I have to move everything through my fiat system, which was it's just a bit of a headache and kind of limits the growth in that sense, just in the clunkiness until real Bitcoin adoption comes along. But ultimately, it was just Bitcoiners started asking me to buy wine, and then Bitcoiners started asking me to buy wine with Bitcoin, and they kept doing so. And they really kept doing so to the point where it was like, this is a growing thing for my business. Initially, I thought I would do farmers markets to be in these ski towns, Aspen, Telluride, selling to wealthy people who can afford high-end wine. And I knew there was an end date for that because there was a lot of driving. And so I always thought it would be having a tasting room in my hometown, and you change clientele a decent amount, but there's a lot of other tasting rooms here. It's a proven business model. And eventually Bitcoiners just started buying so much wine that I was able to say, like, I don't sell to the general public anymore. Anyone can buy my wine. You can go to my website and order it. But I've gotten to the point where basically the only orientation my business has is towards Bitcoiners. And that's for a few reasons. they're very supportive and they appreciate their own. So Bitcoiners buy from other Bitcoiners and basically are super value aligned and want to spend their money, vote with their money on people and things that are either driving their life forward or driving the world they want to see forward. And so if high quality wine that doesn't make you feel bad drives your life forward, you're going to buy from me. And I also am a Bitcoiner, so you're going to buy from me because I'm generally the only other person selling wine for Bitcoin. So if you're going to buy wine as a Bitcoiner, you buy from me. And then additionally, yeah, you have those Bitcoiners looking to figure out health stuff. So they figure out health. They realize that you don't have to feel bad drinking. So they switch to wine that makes it so you don't feel that bad. And it's all these people who are kind of entering this new phase of their life financially. And wine is kind of this, it is this thing we think of when you think of being rich, you think of being able to afford nice wine. It's one of those trappings of luxury. And my thinking is a lot of what I do is I try and make that approachable. So Bitcoiners are new wealth. They're trying to figure things out, try new things. And my role is to say, hey, you don't have to go into this crazy world of elitist wine because that is like, I'll get into that to a sec, but that's like a kind of this super fiat world of classism, jargon, and just like status. But you don't have to go into that world. You can just find wine that you like. Like I said, do you like it? Does it make you feel good? And that's all you have to do. There's no deep world that you have to spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on wine. You can buy wine that you like that is just makes you feel good, and you're going to be happy. You're going to be living your best life because ultimately wine is a bit of a multiplier. It can multiply your sadnesses if you're drinking to escape, but it can also multiply your happiness in a way that if you're with a close group of family, friends, you can really escape that outer world and be a little bit more focused in the moment. If you have a great meal, it can really elevate the flavors of that meal. So if you use wine in the right way, it can really multiply the benefits of your life. And Bitcoiners are seeing so much increasing benefit in their life that it just fits in really well with them. And leaning in was just kind of the obvious path.
Yeah. And so what tools are you using to actually accept Bitcoin from Bitcoiners who are buying your wines? Are you using, like just a hot wallet connectivity? Are you running a node? Like what's the actual infrastructure look like for you?
So I'm not very technical and don't have much desire to be. So I'm not going to run I want to run Lightning because I want to get instant payments and I don't want a ton of tiny UTXOs as the Bitcoin price runs up. So running a Lightning node is beyond my desires for capabilities. So I use Zaprite, connected to Strike, keeps all my taxes just in case in the event that I have to sell. It has my essential buy prices and everything. And then I run everything through my liquor compliance company and they handle all the actual alcohol taxes. Like I said, they are, I'm probably the only one asking for Bitcoin support from them. So I understand them not diving into it and putting it up, but it is frustrating being a Bitcoiner and being forced to interact with these fiat rails. I always say that there's nothing that makes you more bullish on Bitcoin than having to deal with a bank. And the same can be said for any fiat rails. It's so nice to be able to just have Bitcoin things work instantly. The money is in your bank account or in your wallet, and I don't have to wait 3 business days or a weekend to get paid. It's just there. And so that makes my life much easier in addition to it just being better money.
Yeah, that I imagine is definitely a challenge for you. Like, is that the only challenge that you're really facing in accepting Bitcoin or holding it in the business? Or is there anything else that you think about as you're maintaining maybe a treasury in Bitcoin or dealing with payments that are coming from across the world, even though they are in Bitcoin and you don't have to rely on those fiat rails?
So I am US only. That's a liquor licensing issue, and also shipping wine across the oceans is you're likely to get destroyed wine by the end of that. So No foreign payments for me that I have to worry about. And ultimately, yeah, it works super smoothly. So the only issue is liquor licensing. And I would love to be able to go. There's so many tools in Bitcoin now that just are interesting, make things exciting, fun, things you can't do or just build in the fiat world. And I can't really take advantage of them because of this liquor licensing issue. And there's no real end in sight for that. The only thing would be if I grew to 10x my size, which honestly, Bitcoin kind of allows me to stay small. So the other thing I do have to think about is just the price run up. And price run up is great. Price drawdown afterwards, not so exciting. And part of that is like I have big cash flow needs at specific times of the year. So I have to plan for some huge expenses in September for winemaking season. Basically now, because it would really suck to have Bitcoin run up to, let's say, 150K in July and then just randomly have some far off political thing happen and it drops down to 115K or something through the fall. And then right after I have my big expense, it shoots up. So I have to do a bit of hedging there, just as far as like either DCAing out or just kind of watching the market a little bit more than a normal hodler would. But that's like, it's all good because if I have my entire treasury in Bitcoin and it's been going up, but unfortunately it went down a little bit in the last couple of months. It's still up massively. So it's good problems to have, maybe a little bit more to think about, but that more to think about is well worth it in the long run, just with Bitcoin appreciation. That said, if I'm getting paid and we're at 500,000 or $1 million, like later this year, if we run up like crazy, that wine in the next couple months is likely going to be worth a lot less than I sold it for, as far as like real world value. So I've never been a Bitcoin company as far as like selling things at the peak of a bull run. And it's kind of a new experience for me, but I am kind of having to manage things a little bit tighter. It opens doors, but it also just kind of has me a little bit on a more of a knife's edge than just your typical DCA hodler.
Yeah, it's funny because, you're saying you don't sell wine internationally, but in a way you are dealing with like foreign currency risk or foreign currency exchange risk there that you have to kind of manage as taking in revenues in the form of Bitcoin, but then also having your expenses denominated in dollars in a lot of ways. I imagine you're not buying grapes from other people, or you're not buying bottles and paying for those with Bitcoin, right? Have you orange pilled any of your suppliers yet?
We're a long ways off, and there's no orange pilling my suppliers. That's really just like in all these big companies, it's the CEO gets orange pilled and that trickles down. But it's interesting to watch. Like I've been in the wine for 6 years and Bitcoin for 5-ish, a little over 4, and kind of melding those two. I meet a lot of winemakers in the area, and they tell them what I do, and some of them don't get it at all, and some of them are like, that's interesting, I see what you're doing. Like obviously you have a customer niche that you found that works for you, and it's interesting to take some of your profits in a different currency, and that's as far as it gets. And I think some of that's just being nice, and I get it, because in the wine world it's years and years and years to establish an identity, to establish like I produce good wine consistently, and to establish a business. And they've seen so much come and go, and so many risky things disappear. And also it's the general public not understanding Bitcoin. So I kind of have these two things working against me. One, the general public's understanding of Bitcoin. These people don't get it. And two is I'm the new guy on the block. I'm the young whippersnapper making wine. And so why would they take advice from me, especially after I've experienced a drawdown, and I'm kind of just now 4 years in experiencing any sort of like real net worth appreciation. So I don't really try and orange pill these people. I tell them what I'm doing and it's working for me. And I just understand, like, they don't want to hear it from me. They want to hear it from someone who's more successful than them. And I totally get it, because I always think, don't take advice from someone on something who doesn't have what you want in that thing. So if someone is divorced, you probably don't want to take marriage advice from them unless you want a divorce. So I understand that they don't want to take advice from me in that sense, and I know they will in the future, and I know what I'm doing is right, but ultimately, like, they're not going to hear it from me. So I'm just going to ask them wine questions and not really try an orange pill. But it would be cool to kind of create a little nexus of, I mean, the Colorado wineries are the closest to me. If they see my success, maybe they want to jump in and I can help them, and we can become a Bitcoin wine area.
Yeah, I mean, the number going up certainly helps. Who knows? Like, there might be some of those conversations that come up naturally just because they know that you're like the Bitcoin wine guy, and they might start asking you questions when we get to 200,000, 250,000, or wherever we're gonna go in this next run. I don't know. You know, it's like you kind of never know like how people's psyche is going to change as they just continue to be exposed to Bitcoin and its adoption and the price going up like that. Right.
Additionally, when you're running a business is insanely time consuming, and that's where you do it because you love it. And so your head's thinking about that all the time. Most people don't have this, like, wanting to understand deep, like, financial issues like I do. So just like normal people, I totally understand. And they're also have this other thing that they're totally consumed. So whenever I'm talking to other business owners that are maybe just kind of curious about it, like asking me questions about it, how can this help my business? I'm always taking it from the perspective of the only way they're going to actually grab on and want to learn and be invested in learning is if it helps them actually make more money. If it's just buy a little bit and wait, there's like once every 4 years that buy a little bit and just wait a little bit is showing insane returns with this period of time that we're kind of in right now. And there's a reason a lot of people come in during that. But most of the time in Bitcoin, it's boring. So they have to figure out ways to make money. And what I found is there are a lot of businesses who make products that Bitcoiners would love. They're just not exposed to, and these businesses don't know that Bitcoiners are their perfect audience. So we as Bitcoiners have been dying to be spoken to. We say, you know, we want to opt out of corporatism and everything, but really, like, we want products made for us. You know, we want the world to be shaped towards us. And so generally I find Bitcoiners, from a baseline as a business, to attract Bitcoiners, you have to obviously accept Bitcoin. And then 2, you need to have a high quality product. And a lot of times it also helps to have a like real connection with the customers, have like a personal figure in front of the band. So smaller brands, I think, are both a little bit more flexible to orient towards Bitcoiners and relate with Bitcoiners more, because it can be direct interaction with the founder. And then also Bitcoiners I have proven, are a large enough niche for a smaller business to be able to orient towards and have it absolutely change how their business is doing. And so as the business increases in size, Bitcoiners, they stay the same as far as numbers of people. So they're going to be a smaller and smaller niche. But we saw in the 2024 election, Bitcoin/crypto made a difference. And so if there's enough Bitcoiners/crypto people to make a difference in the US political elections, there's probably enough to make a difference for your business. And so, like I said, I've seen this for relatively smaller businesses. Either they have a successful thing going and then they orient towards Bitcoiners as well, and it makes a difference. And then also smaller, like real small businesses just focusing on Bitcoin, run by Bitcoiners. But the big thing, as you're familiar with, is Steak and Shake is leaning in. They are a big business, and we don't know anything behind the curtains, but all their messaging is like, Bitcoin is changing the game for us. And, you know, for a while it was like, okay, this is awesome. We'll see if it lasts. Like, are there really enough Bitcoiners to change the game for Steak and Shake? And I know that Bitcoiners will put out for Steak and Shake, because Steak and Shake's doing the right thing. They switched to a high quality product in tallow. And if I'm gonna eat Wendy's versus Steak and Shake, every Bitcoiner is gonna go to Steak and Shake if they're across the street. So it's an easy thing for them to do. But it really seems to be making a difference, and that is, I don't know, incredibly exciting for me as far as like where we're at in the Bitcoin adoption cycle, less for price and more for world changing things. And if Bitcoiners are big enough to change the game for Steak and Shake, like that may seem small, but every other business is going to start watching that, and every other business can start adopting it. And it's a pretty low hanging fruit to adopt Bitcoin and just improve your quality of product a little bit. And that makes the world better. So that's got me incredibly excited recently for anything outside of number grow up technology stuff.
Yeah, you can really put yourself at a advantage relative to your competition by accepting Bitcoin and by actually really adopting it and using that language and catering to Bitcoiners, just because we have this passion for Bitcoin that pushes us to want to support other people who are in that community, other business owners who are selling things and adopting Bitcoin, and really like, kind of integrating that into our lives for all of these other things that we want to, right? We want to be surrounded by Bitcoin and Bitcoiners. And so it only makes sense that we also want to be surrounded by products that are made by Bitcoiners there. So, and it seems like you've had a ton of success in doing that, so much so that you're exclusively focused on Bitcoin. And it sounds like your business is growing quite drastically. Is that right?
Yeah. So yeah, things are good. Things are growing well, and
I've read recently that the wine business, generally speaking, has actually been kind of shrinking. That you're and that would imply that you're kind of working against that headwind. So if you're still making progress by taking this approach, that says something pretty important, I think, right?
Absolutely, and that's a great call out. I can't tell you how many times I've had other winemakers or go to wine conferences and there's speakers talking about how to get around the effects of people not wanting to drink wine as much anymore. And yeah, I don't see that at all, honestly. I'm insulated from it. There is a bit just to be said, just for full transparency, is like, as a small business, I can still be growing and just carving out my niche while the general trend is going lower. But in that people are drinking less wine anecdote, I think it's true. People are drinking less wine, but people are drinking less crappy wine. People are drinking less boxed wine and less $20 barefoot wine. And those wines are getting outcompeted by both not drinking. There's a growing trend of people realizing that they're being poisoned by food and what's in the alcohol and just deciding they're healthier not drinking. And people like other competitors there's so many different canned beverages right now, seltzers, tequila spritzers, like all different kinds of things. And those are all kind of taking the market share of what cheap wine would do. And so as people realize that they feel crappy and out drinking alcohol, they maybe limit it to 1 or 2 nights a week as opposed to having a beer every night or whatever their marginal change is. And ultimately what I see anecdotally is people gravitate towards, in those scenarios, maybe drinking a little bit nicer wine. They really want to enjoy that one time they get to drink. And Bitcoiners move even further in that direction because increasingly they're able to afford to buy the nicer wine. And that's another thing, is drinking is expensive. And so, yeah, people in the fiat world, their wages are decreasing in purchasing power and they can't afford to drink every night anymore. So they have to cut back. And wine is seen as a luxury good, even if it's relatively cheap. So I am fighting against that trend, but it's in a couple different ways. Is one, my customer base is different. My customers are focused on health, and in that focus on health, they drink nicer quality wine that doesn't make them feel as bad. And also they're able to afford to do that and have much more reason to celebrate higher quality meals and hopefully more time spent with family and loved ones.
Yeah, it's such an important point that your customer base are experiencing massively growing purchasing power on a year-to-year basis, that certainly helps them to buy more of your products and that kind of thing. I want to shift gears a little bit. You recently posted a video that went pretty viral, got a lot of views on X, and you were talking about the story of you borrowing to buy Bitcoin, and sounded like it was a little bit of a tough time for you. And I'm just curious, like, could you share that story with us? And what thoughts or advice do you have for people who might be considering borrowing to buy Bitcoin or leveraging their stack in some way?
Yeah, so I got into the background of this a little bit, but I'll recap. Started the winery and took out a bunch of debt, way higher than my net worth at the time. Everything I'd saved to start the winery, start building out infrastructure and producing grapes. And then the second year in of grape production was even bigger, so I'd have to take out more debt. And all of that debt is to my dad, which adds some familial stress, just being in debt to family. But it was a decent interest rate, decent terms. And ultimately, my dad got his career started with a loan from his mom to start building houses. So there's a lot of like value in that, but it's ultimately, it is a little stressful to owe your parents money. And basically, as soon as I got all in on wine, I started learning about Bitcoin, and Bitcoin's going crazy. So as I said, it's like, this is rational. This is Bitcoin being priced rationally. It should be at infinity. And so that first run up, I withdrew the only money I had saved left, which was my Roth IRA, took the hit and just threw it all into Bitcoin. And a week later, Bitcoin crashed 50%. So I did that at the first thing to 60, and then pretty instantly it was down to $30,000. And in that, I took that very in stride because I thought Bitcoin was going to keep going up forever. And I said, this is the most insanely lucky thing that's ever happened to me, Bitcoin dropping 50%, because I thought it was just going to keep going up forever. I can buy more. Yes. And, kept DCAing through that time. I was working on building this house, so I was getting paid every week and was just had cash flow to be able to continue doing so. And then it started running up again, and I felt like I didn't have enough. I saw what happened last time Bitcoin ran up, and I'd never dealt with markets before this period of time in my life. I was a buy index funds and forget about it kind of guy. So right at the top where people are taking on leverage and there's euphoria, and I'm not really feeling any sort of euphoria because this whole time I've been trying to catch up and build a position, and Bitcoin's going to infinity and I'm never going to get enough. So I decided to take out a loan at the top, and made sure I could pay the loan. But again, this is a loan to from my sister to buy Bitcoin at $60,000. And then the entire next year, I continued doubling down because it was just, it's a dip. You buy the dip. And so I continued doubling down during that time of easy money. I was taking out 0% interest credit cards to fund my life and then just put every dollar I earned into Bitcoin. So by the time we got to $16,000, I was extremely broke and way down on my position. And I remember thinking we dropped all the way down to 16. And I remember thinking, like, this is it. I have to buy the bottom. Bought the last bit of my bank account. And then I said, I'm done. I have to be done. I'm going to keep everything I have. But ultimately, the only way I can buy Bitcoin in the future, because I am that broke, is to sell wine for it. And so, so thankful for the people who paid with Bitcoin to buy wine at that price. And that's how I've stacked for the last 2.5 years. I haven't bought any Bitcoin, but have been able to stack a lot selling wine. And that was extremely humbling, because I did the research. I knew what Bitcoin was. And that almost honestly is what did me in at the top, but kept me in at the bottom, because I had that conviction.
Was your conviction shaken at any time during that run up? I mean, that last move down to 15.5 or whatever, that 16,000 that you're talking about. I mean, I I can imagine that if you started your journey in this last cycle and it's kind of near the top and you're dealing with all of that and you've got the added kind of stress of this debt that you're taking out and these 0% credit cards, that for a lot of people you'd be like, oh, maybe I just made a terrible mistake here.
Well, I trusted myself. I think that I had done enough research. I was obsessed. All I could do was learn about Bitcoin. The scary part was when the total amount of Bitcoin that I'd ever bought was worth less than the debt. And that happened right at the bottom. And so that was really scary. I'd been negative net worth for a long time. That's what you get when you start a business that has super capital intensive and time intensive, aging product. But I always had that get out of jail. If things really go wrong, I can just sell all the Bitcoin and just be out of debt and free to clear. And when that no longer was essentially an option, that was really scary. Just had a lot of other bad things kind of coincide. And I think that's just kind of how life goes, is when it's good, and when it's bad, and you deal with it all. But ultimately, I tied up my identity with it so much. I think while like, I wouldn't say I really had my conviction tested. It was tested, but not shaken, because I'd done enough research and had met enough Bitcoiners at that time. I really knew what Bitcoin was. I just didn't understand markets. That was my fatal flaw. But what really hit me was I had told some friends, I told everyone, but I'd gotten some friends to buy at $60,000, and I was loud about it. And that was pretty humbling to be like, look, guys, I am right. I was very wrong about timing, and there's nothing I can do to prove that to you, because you're not going to do the work except wait. And so I felt like I had to bite my tongue for a long time, or just like prove to people like, nope, I'm still in, man. I'm still convicted. And I knew that in time I would be right, but ultimately it was tough to know that, like, I convinced some friends to buy at the top, and they bought and walked it all the way down. And the two that I really convinced to buy, they held all the way through. So I'm like super proud of them, but it is obviously unfortunate. But it's in like leaning into Bitcoin so much, my business, it started becoming more and more of my business. It was just all I was obsessed with. I was going to Bitcoin events and so into it, as a lot of people get when they first learn about it, that it was extremely isolating at that time. So it was extremely isolating to be all about this thing that made me go broke, that no one else understands, and the world kind of hates at the time. And when you have the loan on top of that, it's so much weight and pressure that it's really hard. And I think most people like would probably get shaken out, and I was very close to. So when I think about like taking on leverage and everything now, it can work out really well, but it can also work out really poorly. And I think if you have any sense of I'm trying to chase this thing, you're probably better off just sitting on your hands, even if it might work out in the long run. Even if you might get lucky on timing, like the downside really blows. And there's probably nothing worse than feeling, I don't have this experience because I just bought the top and could have more Bitcoin, but I would imagine there's probably nothing worse than putting Bitcoin in a collateralized loan and getting liquidated and having your previous Bitcoin balance be that much higher than your current one, and you got nothing to show for that. So like I had my dollar balance decrease, but over that entire time, never sold, just kept stacking more Bitcoin. And that's the number I focused on. And so, especially if you're like the big thing right now is taking out Bitcoin collateralized loans, and could work out really well. And if you have a ton of Bitcoin, you're probably pretty safe at it if you do a small amount. But man, if you're just doing that to catch up because you don't think you have enough Bitcoin, I think you're better off just listening to some more podcasts and getting more bullish than trying to chase and get your number go up higher.
Yeah, appreciate that. Well, we got a few minutes left. what's next for Peony Lane? What's next for Ben? And tell the listeners, like, how can they find you? How can they buy your wines? Pay for it in Bitcoin, of course, if you'd like to. Send us off here.
Yeah, so I am kind of just in the wilderness, figuring out how to go completely online, and been doing it for a while. But moving away from any in-person sales is a transition. So I'm always looking for ways to have events to taste my wine, for people to taste my wine. So I do stuff at the space in Denver relatively regularly, about quarterly, and around the country at different events every once in a while. And then I am shipping all over the United States, unless you live in basically Utah is the only state that has issues with shipping wine. So anywhere you go, you can find my wine, and I'm on Twitter at Ben Justman, and my website is at Peony Lane. And I'm always available if you have questions about the wine. I totally understand. Like, if you've never tasted it and you're looking to order 6 bottles, you want to know what you really should try and what you're going to like. So always reach out. Happy to share you taste profiles and just get you the right wines, and just love meeting other Bitcoiners and hearing about the stories of what you're celebrating when you're drinking my wine. Because I think that's the coolest thing is hearing about, yeah, I had this incredible dinner and drank your wine and it really made it good. And I did one anecdote is I had one buddy who his friend shot a bear, and they ate bear for dinner with my wine. And I think that's just great timing with what's going on right now.
Wow. Incredible. Yes. All right. Ben, thank you so much for the time. Really enjoy the conversation. Hopefully we'll catch you on the next one. Good luck in the rest of this bull market. And I'm going to go order some wine.
Thank you, Trey. Thanks for having me. And happy bull market to you too, sir.
All right.